So today I'm going to be talking to you about anti-concussion helmets, specifically in football. So part one, I'm just going to introduce and tell you basically what a concussion is and then talk about the helmet. So a concussion, it's a very common brain injury. They classify it as a TBI, which is like a traumatic brain injury. And a lot of people think like when you get them, you get like knocked out. But actually like less than 1/3 actually involve loss of consciousness. The symptoms are headaches, dizziness, confusion, nausea, amnesia, vertigo, and fatigue. So like how it happens is like you have a blow to the head or you hit your head and it makes your brain like accelerate, and then when your head hits something, it decelerates very fast and your brain like bounces all around the inside of your skull and it like bruises it. It has a lot of long-term effects that are very serious, like if you have repeated concussions like dementia, Alzheimer's, and CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And CTE is very serious and a big reason why these helmets were made. So this is the first helmet that I'll be showing you. It's the Riddell Revolution SpeedFlex. And this isn't the main helmet, but this kind of started the movement. And it was the first helmet to not have a fixed outer shell. It was developed in 2014, and there's a place on the crown, right here, and it acts like a hinge. So it helps like disperse the energy and lower the acceleration, and it lengthens the hit. Don Armet, he's the president of Riddell, and he says that they try to combine safety with looks and comfort, which I don't know if you're like, if whenever you try to make it like look better, if it like decreases the safety, but they use a head monitoring system where they put like a cap on the person that has 2 million data points, and then they like put them through tests, or they'll put them in practice, and then they retrieve the data and they see like where to put the flexibility and where to put more padding. And then Thad Ide, he's the senior vice president of research and development, and he gets direct feedback from players and also along with the science and research, so he asks them like how they would want the helmets. And this kind of started the non-hard shell idea. And so this is the main helmet we'll be focusing on. It's the Visus 01. So there were 3 people who created it. They were all from Seattle. The first was Sam Browd. He was a neurosurgeon, and he was from the University of Washington, and he's a professor and engineer of neurological surgery there. And then he also works as a neurosurgeon at Seattle's Children's Hospital. And then there's Per Reinhold. He is a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Washington. And Dave Marver, he's the former CEO of Cardiac Science Corp, which is the company that makes like all the AEDs and defibrillators. They all teamed up to create this helmet, and it debuted in 2017, and the outside shell gives on impact and helps absorb the hit. So it has like a 4-layer system. It has the outside, which is like right here, and it's real soft and it bends, and then the second layer right here, there's 500 little rubber columns that compress, and then the third layer, it's a harder shell. So they basically took like a normal helmet and turned it like inside out, so like all the soft stuff's on the outside, and then they have the hard shell on the inside to prevent like fractures of the skull, and then they just have a little bit of padding. In its first year of testing through the NFL's like NFL, their helmet test, it finished first out of 33 helmets, and currently this company only makes football helmets, but they're going to start making lacrosse and hockey helmets. When it first came out, it was $1,500, which is crazy expensive compared to most NFL helmets that are only $250 to $450. But they also designed them specifically for trainers, because when there's a head or neck injury in football, they usually just take the face mask off, but they can't take the helmet off. They have to like cut it off because of how tight it's on. But they made it so the jaw pads, like right here, they'll snap out. So they snap it out and then they just slide the helmet right off the person. So it's really easy if there's a serious injury. This helmet took 4 years of research, and they got $20 million of funding. Another reason this helmet is safer, it has a wider field of view. So as far as the face mask, it's the widest, so you can see like if someone's coming to blindside you, or it's just like helps with performance too. So now I'm going to go to part 2 and basically like why they wanted to create this helmet. And so these are like the long-term effects of concussions. CTE, as I talked about earlier, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It happens with repeated blows to the head or like repeated concussions, and it's associated with like dementia and Alzheimer's. So a lot of times people have dementia or Alzheimer's, and then once they die, they find out they have CTE. And this is like a normal brain, like if you sliced it right down the middle, and this is a brain with CTE. As you see, it basically like it's just diminished. A lot of the symptoms are thinking or memory problems, personality changes, aggressiveness or depression. And the problem with this, you can only diagnose it after death. So like a lot of people have it, but you don't find out till you die. And it also makes it hard to try to prevent it because you don't know if they have it. But this disease was discovered in 2002 when Dr. Bennett O'Malley in Pittsburgh did a autopsy on Mike Webster. He was a Hall of Fame center for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he was going crazy, and he died of a heart attack, but then they tested his brain just to see if there was something wrong, and his brain basically looked like this, and they confirmed it as CTE. And since then, 111 dead NFL players have donated their brains, and 110 of them had CTE, which is a crazy number. Over 4,000 players have sued the NFL since all these findings, saying that they knew about like the link between concussions and CTE and the long-term effects, and they basically said that NFL was like ignoring all of the evidence. So there was another guy, Junior Seau. He killed himself at 43, and he played in the 90s and early 2000s. Which, like, the helmet technology was getting a little bit better, but they were still basically like hard plastic shells with just a little bit of padding, and he had severe CTE. And then Aaron Hernandez, he was a very well-known tight end for the Patriots, and he was also well-known because he committed murder, but he was only 27, and he hung himself in his jail cell, and then they tested his brain, and he had a very severe case of CTE, and he was only 27. And there he was one of the youngest confirmed cases. And then they're saying the CTE may have attributed to his violent streak, but he also had past violent history. So they're not 100% sure on that. But one of the reasons people believe that is because he just signed a $40 million deal with the Patriots, and then he went out and committed murder. So they're saying like he might not have been thinking clearly. Hernandez did try to sue the NFL over CTE, but the judge ruled against it and said that he was already retired and arrested, so they had some kind of retirement settlement. But if like Aaron Hernandez had it at only 27, like how many other players in the NFL have it currently, but they don't know because they're still alive. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a timeline of the NFL's like history with concussions. So they didn't really mention concussions or really care about concussions until the 2000s when players started killing themselves or dying. They started finding out that they had CTE. So in 2005, the NFL had a mild TBI committee, like traumatic brain injury, and they said returning to play after a concussion does not induce risk of another injury, and that was after that doctor discovered CTE, and then later in 2005 and then into 2006, 2 more Steeler players committed suicide, and they did find CTE in their brain. And then in 2007, the NFL finally did something, and they put like a hotline on the sidelines that a trainer or someone, they would call the league if someone was playing in in a game that had a concussion that they tried to take them out of, and they would be like fined or they'd get in some kind of trouble. So in 2010, there was a doctor, Dr. Ira Kaysen, who's the chair of the mild TBI committee, and they denied any link of blows to the head and long-term brain injury. So the NFL in 2010 denied that any link between CTE and getting concussions while playing. But also in 2010, Roger Goodell, since he was under a lot of pressure, he told teams that if you targeted heads that you'd be suspended or fined, and this is kind of whenever all of the targeting penalties start coming about, and you see the hits in football that you get a flag and then they're suspended for 2 games and fined. And then another player in 2011, Dave Duerson, he was 50 years old. He committed suicide also, and he had CTE. And then also in the same year, right around the same time, there was another player, Ray Easterling. He was 62. He also committed suicide and had CTE. And by 2012, when the lawsuit started happening, there was 2,000 players suing the NFL over the certain, like, between them thing that there's a link. And then the same year, the NFL donated $30 million to research. And then the next year, the players and the NFL that were in the lawsuit, that by that year there was over 4,000 people involved, like ex-players that were suing. They reached a deal of $765 million that they would donate, like split up between like helping players and donating to research. But in 2014, the judge denied that and said that that's not enough money. And they said they need to come up with another deal. That same year, the youngest confirmed case of CTE was found, and this guy, he killed himself and his girlfriend. His name was Javon Belcher. They tested his brain. He got CTE. He was only 25 years old, and he played in the NFL. And then in 2015, they finally came up with a deal. So they were going to donate the NFL was going to give $5 million to each player in the lawsuit that had to help with like medical costs and just different complications that they had from playing. And there's players that like don't die from anything CTE related. Like this guy Ken Stabler, he died in 2015 of colon cancer. But whenever they tested his brain, he did have CTE. So some people commit suicide and then they find it, but a lot of others have been dying of natural causes, but they've had like Alzheimer's or dementia. In 2016, the NFL finally said that there is a link between concussions and CTE. So it took them from 2002 when they first discovered it to 2016 to finally say that there is a link. And that same year, they implemented a new concussion protocol. So if you don't follow it as far as if you have a concussion being tested on the sideline for it, that the team could be fined and lose draft picks. So teams really start taking this a lot more seriously. And then the league and 32 owners donated $100 million to research and advancement. They also linked CTE to ALS because there was a football player, Kevin Turner, who had ALS and he died from it, and then they tested it and they had CTE and they linked it somehow as far as like how dementia and Alzheimer's is linked with CTE. And from 2005 to 2012, concussions went up 61%. And I think it went up so far just because they never really recorded any statistics about concussions before. So then they started having to report them and just like skyrocketed. So now I'm going to talk to you about the evolution of NFL helmets and just like the helmets before this advancement of this helmet, so you can see like what they looked like up until then. So in the 1920s, they started wearing like some kind of helmet, and it was just basically a soft leather helmet, which like they didn't have any padding on the inside, just kind of covered the outside of your head. But in the 30s, they created a hard leather helmet like this one. Like there's like a little bit of padding on the inside, but it's still like leather. So later in the 1939s, John Rydell, he started Rydell, like the football helmet company. He created a plastic helmet, but in the 40s they still used the leather, but by then it was like a hard leather, and they had a chin strap on it, and it had more padding. And the NFL did require all players in the 40s to wear some sort of helmet. So in 1949, the NFL adopted plastic helmets completely, so every single player had to wear a plastic helmet. And they didn't really have any padding inside. It was just like these suspended straps that went around your head, which kept your head like this far from the outside of the plastic. So it was just like a plastic shell and then like the straps. And they started wearing face masks then. And in the 60s, it was basically the same helmet, just like the suspended straps, but they added like a double bar face mask, and everyone was required to wear a face mask. And then in the 70s, this is whenever they started coming up with just new technology. So they have these energy absorbing helmets where they added like this padding into the inside that has air in it, so it's like air bladder padding, because they realized they need more protection because a lot of guys were getting messed up and like they didn't classify it as anything really. And then in the 80s, they made a little bit more advancement. It was a molded polycarbonate shell, which is like a high resistant polymer. So like basically just like a fancy plastic that helps helmets maintain their shape in like different kinds of weather. And it was just a lot safer than just like the regular plastic. And in the 90s, they maintained like that same molded polycarbonate shell, but they just made like different advancement to like how it's made and added different kind of padding. But in the 2000s, Rydell came up with this new helmet called the Revolution, and this is like this helmet right here. And it's basically the same kind as it's still like that molded polycarbonate shell, but they added a different kind of padding, like safer padding to the inside. And this is what a lot of players wore all throughout the 2000s. And so really, these helmets aren't that safe. They're supposed to be the first helmets to help prevent concussions, but they were really bad at preventing concussions. But since the 2000s and like this helmet came out, helmets have been getting a lot safer, because I think they got safer since the 2000s just because the NFL didn't really care about the concussions. Then once everything started happening, they were like, oh, we need to start coming up with new helmets. So now back to this helmet, the Vices 01. It started getting researched in 2014 when concussions were a huge problem and there were a lot of lawsuits. And as you saw with the helmet technology, it was in a huge need of an advancement, because it was basically the same thing since like the 70s. So Dr. Sam Brown, he was one of the co-founders. He told a story of why he wanted to actually make this helmet, and he was the neurological surgeon, and he dealt a lot with like brain injuries and concussion testing. So a football player in Seattle came in, he was a high school football player, and he had his 5th concussion, and he actually had to tell him that like he can't play football anymore and that like his career's over. And he had Division I offers, and like after that he decided that like he needed to do something that help stop this, because like he was tired of like telling people that their career's over just because they keep getting concussions. So he got funding and teamed up with the 2 others, Per Reinhold and Dave Marver, and he knew that they had like the ability and knowledge, since they were in like these other medical fields, to help them in like the engineering backgrounds. And they got $20 million of funding in 2013-14 to create a safer helmet. So whenever they were looking at how they should make this helmet, they looked at like really safe cars and they wanted to model it after it. So the safe cars, like the really high rated safe cars today, whenever they wreck, they get demolished, because everything compresses and breaks up until like the cabin where like the person is in the car. So, because the old cars back in the day, they were all solid steel and they were real hard. So whenever you ran into something, it was just like this. But now the cars that are like super safe, whenever they wreck into something, like this is like the engine and everything, they like compress and then you hit something. So it slows down the acceleration, and the person that's like inside doesn't like fly forward as much as like the old cars. Because the old cars, you just like wreck into something. So it's basically like how the old helmets were. It was like your brain just like in your head smashed the top of your helmet. Whereas like this new helmet you can see, it like compresses whenever it hits something. Whereas this helmet like maintains the shape and it just kind of bounces, and your head like bounces off the padding. And so that was their thought process in like making these helmets. So whenever they debuted it, it tested like first in out of all 33, and it's maintained the #1 spot in the past 3 years of testing. And it also meets the NOCSAE test, which has to be below 1200 severity index units. And companies are not allowed to actually like put out their number that they got for testing, because they don't want to have a false sense of security, like say this helmet's like a lot safer. But that's basically the same thing as like the NFL's test, because you can look and say like that's the #1 rated helmet, like it's a lot safer than all the other ones. But the NFL tests them by putting them on a model head and then dropping them on a steel anvil. It has like a rubber plate to simulate like hitting the ground or hitting another helmet. And they drop it 20 times from different heights, and then they drop it 2 times from 60 inches, which represents like 12 miles per hour. So like a pretty hard hit. Also, it has a 5-star rating for the STAR system, which was developed by Dr. Stefan Duma, which is the head of the biomedical engineering at Virginia Tech. And it made a rating system called the Summation of Tests for the Analysis of Risk, or the STAR rating. In 2011, only 1 helmet got 5 stars, and then 2013, 4 helmets got 5 stars. And there's companies that were getting the 5 stars were like Rydell and Schutt and Zenith, which those are like helmet brands that have been around for a lot longer. But in Vices' first year, they got 5 stars. So if they got 5 stars in like the first helmet they ever produced, then upcoming, they might be able to create like an even safer helmet. But there's some other helmets that got like 5 stars, and I'll talk about like what makes them like a good helmet. So the Rawlings NRG Taken, it has an air bladder that bulges against the helmet, not the skull. And then there's the Schutt Vengeance VTD, which has a double layer of cushion on the crown. And they like decreased the padding in other places where it was considered less crucial to make it lighter. And then the Zenith Epic, they basically like resized and repositioned all the padding to better mimic the skull. And they use air-filled shock absorbers, and then they have this substance between the padding and the helmet. It's called Porin XRD, and it's like soft to the touch, but then it turns hard on impact. And it's supposed to help make the helmet safer. And then the Riddell Revolution Speed Flex, which is this helmet and then that helmet I talked about earlier. And basically, like, it got 5 stars because it just has that hinge on it, and it lengthens like the hit through the acceleration. So now I'm going to show you a video that'll help further, you can see better about the Vices helmet.
While it's the most profitable and popular sport in the United States, the one problem football has are concussions. Football helmets of the past failed to protect players from head traumas. One company out of Seattle, Washington, however, is hoping to completely alter the concussion landscape by introducing their newest helmet, the Vices 01. We traveled north to Seattle to step inside of their lab to take a look at the innovation and technology taking place right there in Washington.
Vices is a sports technology company, and our first product is an improved football helmet called the 01. There's a lot of concern about football, the safety of the sport, and we took a look at the industry 3.5 years ago, and we saw that there really wasn't a lot of innovation that had taken place.
There was a lot of energy being put towards sensors and sensing technology, and it struck me that sensing was really after the fact. So a concussion would occur, we were trying to diagnose that. And looking around, it seemed like there was an opportunity to look at something that may help reduce the risk of concussion or other injuries, and it seemed like the helmet was a logical place to look. And as we started to get a little deeper into what current helmets were and what they were intended for, saw that there was an opportunity to innovate in that space.
Because no one at Vices joined the company with any kind of past experience designing football helmets, the team took a completely original approach to its construction, and the finished product is unlike anything the sport has ever seen.
The 01 is very different than traditional football helmets. It actually deforms or yields upon impact like a car bumper would. The difference is you don't have to take it to the body shop. When it's impacted, it rebounds, and it can be in thousands of collisions.
Though the helmet itself resembles a similar aesthetic to those built by Riddell or Schutt, it's not until you get under the hood of the Vices 01 that you start to notice the difference in its construction philosophy. Led by an innovative layer of flexible columns, the 01 absorbs incoming impact like no helmet before it.
So this is what we call the reflex layer, and this is the second layer of the helmet. And so here you can see the column structures. These can be of various diameters or separation, and what this allows us to do is this membrane can both compress, and you can see the columns bending, but also in shear, these columns can move back and forth. So depending upon how the helmet is impacted, it can both absorb the linear forces, but more importantly, it can address these rotational forces that we think are more causal in terms of concussion.
To legitimize its product and test its technology, Vices purchased the same exact machine that the NFL and the NFL Players Association uses to test the helmets that you see on the field every Sunday. We stepped inside their Smash Lab to see that testing in person. The Smash Lab tests each helmet to the pass-fail standards set by the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment. In addition to dropping the helmet from heights of 2 to 5 feet, Vices leans on this machine to fire a rod directly at a helmet attached to a dummy. This allows it to chart the maximum acceleration experienced by the helmet as it would relate to the body weight of the wearer. This process helps Vices refine its design and test the 01 structures in the harshest environment. This dedication to testing and producing the best possible helmet also caught the attention of the NFL itself.
Even though we're a disruptive brand, we have a disruptive technology, we've worked closely with NFL teams and the league itself to develop this helmet and bring it to market. For the health and safety leadership from the NFL, they took an interest in this fairly early. And in fact, we benefited from an NFL Head Health Challenge grant that's designed to identify and nurture new technologies such as this. So in our experience, they're very keenly interested in bringing new technologies like this to the league, to the players for the benefit of the sport.
While Vice has set out to establish a new bar for safety and protection with the Zero One, it also jumped at the opportunity to develop and implement a series of performance-boosting properties capable of improving any player's on-field experience.
In addition to trying to create the safest possible helmet, we've also tried to introduce some performance-enhancing features to the Zero One. So for example, it has the widest field of peripheral view of any helmet on the market. That allows players to see more of the field, locate the ball more quickly, but they're also less likely to be blindsided. It also dissipates heat very effectively. You can see all the venting. So these are some of the things that we introduced that appeal to young elite athletes who maybe aren't as concerned about safety, but want to perform at their best. And it's aligned with our mission. We want to protect the athlete and elevate the game. We've done that with the Zero One, and we intend to do that with every sport that we enter.
Synology.
So in that video, you could see, like, whenever they were dropping it, you could see the difference between that helmet and then the normal helmets that the NFL has been using, as far as it, like, flexing and compressing, whereas the other helmet just basically just, like, bounced off of, like, the pad. So now part 3, I'm going to talk about some controversy. And the controversy is that no helmet's completely safe. And they said this helmet's supposed to lessen the concussion rate by 80%, which it might, but there's still a chance of concussion. Whereas there's a player, Brian Cushing, which plays for the Houston Texans. He was one of the first 70 players to be wearing this the first year they came out. And the first game of the year, he was wearing this helmet and he got a concussion, along with 4 other players on his team, but they weren't wearing this helmet. He was out for 10 weeks, and he was one of the best players on their defense, and then he's wearing one of the best helmets, and he still gets a concussion. Also, the NFL may be using this helmet to hide the fact that they can't really stop CTE right now, and that they can justify putting their money that's supposed to be for CTE, like, towards, like, advancing these helmets or making, like, better helmets. And they may use it just to blanket CTE for right now, and saying that the Zero One will, like, help it instead of getting to the actual root of the cause and trying to stop CTE. And the helmet may make players hide concussions more, because that's already a very common thing in the NFL, considering that, like, one game can make and break your career. And if you get kicked out, you may be trying to make a living off of playing football. And the Zero One may make people believe that you don't have a concussion since you're wearing, like, the safest helmet. They may think, like, you don't have a concussion, you're wearing, like, this anti-concussion helmet. Another point is the cost, because when they first came out, they were $1,500, whereas the NFL and, like, big colleges can easily afford that. High schools, especially like ours, we definitely cannot afford that, considering we can barely afford the helmets we have now, which are like $200 to $300, and they're not even that good of a helmet. And we don't even have brand new helmets every year. We have, like, maybe half of them are brand new, and the other half are, like, maybe 5-10 years old. Whereas, like, and also, like, other high schools, they definitely can't afford them either. And they lowered the price to just below $1,000. I think it was around, like, $900. But it's still crazy expensive. And the youth helmets, they're $500, but they need to be even safer, I think, because they have more fragile heads and brains. The youth helmet's supposed to debut in 2019, but their heads are growing so fast, so if you play all throughout your youth, then you'll probably have to buy 2 or 3 helmets because of how fast your head grows. So that adds up. It's like $1,500 for 3 helmets. So just like the cost of them is so expensive. Another controversy is the false sense of security. That's why I have this picture of this rugby guy, because in rugby they use their heads specifically. Then they, like, put them out of the way when they tackle, and they learn how to tackle and practice tackling without their heads. Mainly because they don't have helmets on, and it hurts really bad when you hit with your head. And, like, these helmets may make players think that they can use their head even more just because of how safe they are, and they're supposed to, like, you're in a sophisticated concussion wearing them. They may use it, like, as a tool or use it even more, because whenever you have the helmets on now, like the main helmets the NFL wears, whenever you have a helmet-to-helmet hit, it's like a really loud crack. And if you've ever been to a game, you know that sound. And the refs kind of, like, watch for that sound, and it gives them, like, an indication to throw the flag. Whereas this, like, the Vice's Zero One, it makes, like, a deep thud because it doesn't have that hard outside. So, like, the refs may throw the flags even less. And all the feel and the talk surrounding the helmet will probably cause more people to lead with their head just because of how safe they think it is. So why I chose this topic, I played football when I was younger, and I had a really crappy helmet, and whenever you hit with your head, it's like you can hit extra hard with your head, and you can use it almost as like a missile because of how hard the helmets are. And I did have a concussion when I played in 8th grade, and it was really awful. So I didn't even know where I was. So I also like watching football, and it's like a terrible thing to like watch whenever a player gets hurt really bad or like there's a really dangerous hit, just because of how serious all the complications are. And also I feel like I wanted to figure out more about this helmet and just see like how safe they really are. So some of the consequences and benefits of this. I think it'll benefit the sports society definitely. I think it'll benefit a lot more in the upcoming years because I feel like they're going in the right direction with this helmet. I don't think it's totally safe, but it's a whole lot safer than all of the helmets that they had in the prior to this. And I think for the consequences, I think you'll see it get a little bit worse and then a whole lot better. So in the next coming years, I think it'll stay the same or be worse. And then whenever they start coming out with more helmets like this, because there's companies like competing with this helmet and using kind of the similar technology, I think it'll get a whole lot better. So my opinion before, I was kind of skeptical on how this helmet would work and if it was actually safe, and I've heard of it before, but I never really looked into it. And as I mentioned, I played football and I'm a big sports guy, so it interests me and it excited me just to like learn about it and learn all the details. And after, I was still kind of skeptical on, because I'm not sure if it'll lessen or increase the concussion rate, and they haven't really put out any statistics since so few players have worn it. And like they have that one like the notable story about that guy because he's a superstar that had a concussion, but like all of the concussion rates, they haven't really released anything. But they're definitely heading in the right direction just because of like you can see how safe they are already, and like if those many people wore them, and most of the players wearing them were like the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the running backs players who get hit a lot, and none of them had concussions, so they're definitely going in the right direction. And I'm just excited for the future to see like more helmets come out like this helmet. And these are my references.